Time for some analysis. Let's bring in Geoffrey. He's an international human rights lawyer and a former lead prosecutor for United Nations International Criminal Court. He joins me now live from the United Kingdom. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. Is there anything that could possibly justify US's actions against Venezuela?
I wouldn't have thought so. And obviously, we're in a very uncertain and complicated and developing situation. But I think if you stand back, what's going to be the principal concern of other countries, the international community, and one hopes the United Nations, is the issue of sovereignty. Now, it's interesting, it's almost fascinating, except that the issues are so grave, that sovereignty, that is the entitlement of nations to rule themselves and not to be interfered with by others, has been something to which Trump has been completely committed. And indeed, America has been committed right back from the First World War, when it refused to save the people of Armenia on basically sovereignty grounds, right through to what Trump said in his first term of office about not respecting the United Nations. He dressed it up, not respecting the International Criminal Court. He did not dress that up. He was clear about it. And his encouragement of other responsible countries, as he said, to do the same thing as America, basically to put a border around yourself and feel free to do what you like. So that sovereignty is what America apparently believes in. Now, in the last few years, we've seen that belief, in a sense, denied to others, because he's done nothing to deal with the sovereignty issues of Ukraine apart from to favor Putin. And he's done nothing to favor the sovereignty issues of the Palestinians and the people of Gaza by enforcing the rule of law on Netanyahu. And I think that this difference between the response of America to the underlying issue of sovereignty in circumstances that frankly reflect America's interests, probably rather more than humanitarian interests, may be what will emerge in due course. Obviously, we'll wait and see what he says in the press conference. But coming back through that lens, through the lens of sovereignty, does he have any right to do what he did? I wouldn't have thought so. And I imagine, but we'll wait and see, that the majority of responsible countries, as he calls them, countries like our own, will be very concerned at this intervention into the sovereignty of another country.
Geoffrey, you were the former lead prosecutor for the United Nations ICC. And, I really have to ask you this one question here, because this is something that was sent to me by a friend. And, when, of course, this news broke that Venezuelan leader has been captured by the United States, many in the world started to question the legality of this operation. Now, when we talk about Nicolas Maduro, of course, there's a political angle to the story. There are reports within Venezuela and by international observers that he is not the legitimate leader of the country. In the meanwhile, there are still people who support him, right? But in terms of international law, as you rightly pointed out, that it's illegal for the United States to execute such an operation. But, Geoffrey, given the fact that international law has been abused by superpowers, especially over the last decade or so many times, that many across the world are wondering, does it still exist? Is there still something left as international law?
I'll deal with that, but just first, technically, I wasn't chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. I was the lead prosecutor at the Yugoslav Tribunal, and I have worked at the International Criminal Court, but not as the lead prosecutor. So, back to your question, absolutely an appropriate question for you and your correspondent to ask. And indeed, it has been a theme of things that I and many other commentators have said, that international law is being killed off. And it's being killed off by Trump and Putin and Netanyahu because they see it in their present interests as hostile to those interests. And therefore, they don't take any notice of it. And they think they can get away with it. Now, we've been waiting, some of us, I suppose, for other countries to confront Trump and Putin and others with the realities of the international law that they're breaking. But they haven't done it yet. The United Nations has been seen to become weaker and weaker and more ineffectual and barely having anything to say. And so this particular issue, this crisis, if it is a crisis, it looks as though it probably is, may finally force people to stand on one side or another of the line that says international law exists or it doesn't. One of the most pronounced statements, effective statements, not as such by Trump about international law, as you will probably all have noted, is that in his attempts to impose peace deals, as they are described, on Israel-Gaza and also on Russia-Ukraine, he has been heard to say, or his 28 or whatever it is point deals have been said to include, that there will be complete amnesties for both sides. The consequence of that is enormous, because it means there will be no accountability for war crimes committed on either side. And that means the end of international humanitarian law. And so your correspondent and you are correct to question whether recently international law has been effective. I hope.
Geoffrey, to that point, because I want you to expand on this, and I really want to ask you this question. You are an international human rights lawyer, so let me ask you this question on behalf of people who are watching us right now, because I'm sure many are wondering what's going on with international law. Based on what we have seen happen in the world, in Gaza, for example, what we are seeing happen in Ukraine, and then, of course, the U.S. Attacks on Venezuela and the capturing of Nicolas Maduro, why should people still have faith in international law? What would you like to people who are watching us right now? Why should they have faith in law?
I'm not sure whether they should be happy. What they need to do is to, if they take this view, is to encourage their governments through their appointed parliamentarians or whatever system in which they live to stand up for international law and to say not only that the law should exist, the law does exist, the law's still there, but that it should be implemented. And the only way it can be implemented is by our politicians not crawling to Donald Trump as they do, so frightened of what may be the economic consequences of their upsetting a man who has very little intellectual merit, as far as I can see, and probably no moral merit, but just holds power. They should not be crawling to him, but they should be saying, and they should be prepared to back what they say by action, that actually the rule of law is more important because it's something that can be regulated by the world as a whole through the United Nations or through the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice. They should be saying that that is actually more important in the long term than the short-term purposes he seems to serve in America's interest, or as he would say, in the interests of individuals, but that's another matter right now. So it's not a question of whether they're going to be happy about the disappearance of international humanitarian and other international law. Citizens of all countries should recognize, particularly if they live in democracies, that they don't need to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. They can make clear to their leaders, like our own, who goes and frankly sucks up to Trump. They should say to them, for goodness sake, you've brought us to this position where international law is no longer the subject of proper regard, and we actually require of you to do more and to make Trump and Putin and Netanyahu recognize that the law applies and they will take every action, that's governments like our own, whether through sanctions or other means, every action to enforce the law.
Right. Geoffrey, fascinating insights. Do stay with me. I just want to bring our audience up to speed on some of the latest lines that I'm seeing on the wires right now. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Maduro and his wife has been captured and they have been taken to a ship. I don't know what he means by that. Where exactly is this ship and where is it headed towards? Of course, there's a lot of ambiguity there, but just want to bring our audience up to speed on the latest lines from President Donald Trump. And he also said that Maduro and his wife, okay, there's some crucial detail about the location of Maduro and his wife. Donald Trump says Maduro and his wife will be heading to New York. I mean, we got the indication from Pam Bondi about the possibility of them arriving in New York when she said that they will be indicted in New York. And now President Donald Trump is saying that Maduro and his wife will be heading to New York. They have been taken to a ship and certainly crucial developments there. And, Donald Trump, of course, I mean, it's really hard to understand what's going on in his mind right now, especially in terms of the developing situation in Latin America and the region. But again, talking about the legality of the situation, it's clear that he violated U.S. law because he did not get the backing of U.S. Congress before launching this operation. He also violated international law and the UN Charter, and this is something that needs to be needs to be pointed out. But here's the thing: Donald Trump can come to television today and say, "I'm not the first U.S. president to do so. Many before me have done the same."
Yes. And what does that tell us? Not very much. The fact that countries may have behaved unlawfully in the past doesn't justify their behaving unlawfully now. It's not just America who's done these bad things. You only have to look back to the colonial history of all countries who were colonizing powers to see unlawful things done. We can look to the past for guidance, but not for justification. The law is as it is. The United Nations Charter is as it is. And if you choose to break the law and not comply with the Charter, then you are vulnerable to countries that can keep their heads high, that are not in awe of America, as countries should not be in awe of America. It's not a country of which we should be in awe. And those countries should force America and other countries to comply with the law. And so we've gone through this period, I'm rather repeating myself now, where we've bent to the will of America for all sorts of reasons, like not being able to defend ourselves militarily, stupid of us. But we've done all that, and it's now time, perhaps, to review the position. What would be, I think, most encouraging for all of us would be if the United Nations was able now to seem to be strong in resolving this issue, first by proper debate and discussion, and then by some kind of resolution. Of course, America's position as a veto holder on the Security Council is a continuing problem, as is the problem of the other 4 permanent 5 members that have the power of veto. And just let me finish. If this particular crisis, if it is a crisis, leads to an unraveling of recent problems in the international order of things, one of the things that might come up for consideration again, and it should, is the composition of the Security Council and its powers.
Very well said. Fascinating insights, Geoffrey. Nice. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.